Welcome to Rekindled Faith with Melanie Beerda. Whether you've been wrestling with questions, facing doubt, or simply just uninspired, let's dive into what it means to be authentic followers of Christ. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rekindled Faith. My name is Melanie Beerda. I am the host of this podcast. I'm excited for this week's episode. We're going to be talking with Alanzo Paul. Alanzo is a full-time speaker with the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics and director of REBOOT, their youth apologetics initiative. He was born in Calgary, Canada, and came to faith in 2009 after a decade of battling addiction. And now he speaks worldwide on questions of faith, meaning, and truth. Alanzo has studied theology in Oxford and Toronto and is pursuing a doctorate in philosophical theology. He currently lives near Oxford with his wife. So get ready, buckle yourselves in for a great conversation with Alanzo. Both Alanzo and myself are adjunct speakers for Apologetics Canada. If you haven't heard of Apologetics Canada, you should definitely check that out. I will have the links in the show notes. But for now, join me in welcoming Alanzo. Hello, Alanzo. Welcome to Rekindled Faith.
Hello, Melanie. Thank you for having me again. I've been on here before, right?
No.
No, I haven't. Oh my
No,
gosh.
you haven't. This is the first time.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Melanie. I thought I had
That's
done this
totally
once before a couple of years ago. But thank you for having me on for the very first time. How about
fine. Yeah, I'm happy to have you. I think maybe you feel that way because it took us a while to actually sync our schedules and make this happen. So we've been
Facts.
talking for a
Yeah,
while about it.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so I just recently met you in person. You came out for the Western Youth Summit with Apologetics Canada and Trinity Western University.
Let's go. It was a
Yeah,
good
and
time, wasn't it?
it was a great time. It was so much
Yeah.
fun.
What was your highlight?
Well, oh my goodness, it was just like the opportunity to connect with young people. I don't really get a lot of opportunity to talk with teenagers and stuff. So just being able to connect with them over the games time specifically, because then I had more
Oh,
opportunity to talk with them. And I don't know, we're in good hands. These kids are wonderful people and just so passionate about learning about God and, showing up and doing the work. And I just thought that was really cool. But I mean, obviously the speakers like Alanzo did a wonderful job speaking. And I don't know, the whole setup was just great. They did a great job at planning everything. And I mean, the youth kid, all the kids dancing on the stage after everything was done and the encore getting scrap music back out there. It was so fun.
yeah, yeah. That was, yeah, technically, it was just, it felt like a flawless sort of conference for young people, right?
Yeah.
Everything was done with excellence. But I think a highlight for me was, like you, just having some of those conversations. Now, I'm not a games guy, so I sort of peace out when it comes to the games time. But for the lunchtime, I got to sit down with a ton of the young people and just ask them where they're at and see how they're doing. So that was a highlight for me.
Yeah, I liked how they had that set up where you got to mingle with people, that you weren't just put into a different area and unable to talk with the speakers or the volunteers or the staff.
Yeah,
But
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
I thought that was very
Um,
unique.
my pastor used to say to me, Melanie, a shepherd needs to smell like sheep. And I think that's the same with somebody that does what I do, going out and defending the Christian faith. You need to smell like the sheep, so to speak. You need to go and have those conversations in person, sitting down over food, chatting about the big topics and the challenges. And if you're just whisked from one green room to the next, you're going to lose, I think, probably a spiritual power, but also just a relatability to the people that you're trying to speak into their lives. So I think they just did that really well. I'm a big fan of Apologetics Canada, so
I am too. But yeah, that's a breath of fresh air. I love that idea, that perspective of the shepherd smelling like sheep, Because I
Mm.
agree. It's like we we get into these positions of ministry leadership or speaking or whatever, and like I personally don't like the idea of being set apart in the way of like I'm going to go and be like I don't know, just separated from the flock. Like I want to be in with the people. And I think that's why I love volunteering for events like with Apologetics Canada, is because you just get to
Yeah.
know the people that are coming to these things and have really interesting conversations and like ask them about life and ask them about their relationship with God. And they get to talk to me too and ask me questions and stuff like that. And it's just a really unique opportunity to give back to the community and the relationship
Yeah.
of like God and his people. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
yeah. So, you are currently all the way over in Europe. Where are you?
That's just very interesting because over here they wouldn't consider, well, I guess technically England is part of Europe, but they sort of think of it in terms of like the continent is Europe and England's an island. So it's like part of the UK. But that's just very interesting. I used to think the exact same thing. You wouldn't know otherwise unless you live here. But yeah, I live here. I live in Oxford, and I've lived here with my wife since about 2016. We did go back for a few years to do some work and further education, but yeah. I'm Melanie. I'm almost Brit. It was so nice to go back into Canada the other week, just to like sort of rekindle my Canadian roots. I don't want to ever want to lose that. So it was a pleasure to be there. But I love England. You have to come to Oxford. It's hallowed ground. It's enchanting. You're walking where J.R.R. Tolkien was walking, and C.S. Lewis, and the church I go to. There's been a church on that plot of ground for 1,000 years. It's just the history is crazy. They've been doing theology for 900 years at this university. That's why it was started, was to investigate, the study of God, theos and logia, the study of God. So it's a real privilege to live out here.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love I love history. I love old architecture. I think it's got so much character, and I think just also knowing, like you said, like C.S. Lewis walking, like that's just cool to think of all of the people that have walked past these places and
Yeah.
just been, right? I was in Germany about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was like the same. Like I went to like different historic sites and everything, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this is just so cool to be able to experience this and see this. And I find over in North America, like we've got some old buildings, but it's just not the same.
And even old would be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah,
Things that are as old as Canada over here in England are like still fairly recent,
yeah,
still fairly new.
yeah. Wild, pretty
And
cool.
I work out here at the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics.
Yeah,
So I'm an adjunct for Apologetics Canada. So that's why I was out there at the conference. But I work mainly for the OCCA is what they call it, the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics. And then I'm the director of a youth ministry called REBOOT. So this is OCCA's Youth Apologetics Initiative. And our whole vision is to create a space for young people to ask their big questions about God, life, and faith. So the area that we really have a specialization in is one, giving an apologetic talk on in an accessible way on a big question, and then two, doing live Q&A. We actually call it Q&R, question and response. And that seems to be a bit more palatable to a lot of people. You say Q&A and it's sort of like, oh, you're the arbiter of all truth. That's your claim. And that's not our claim. Our claim is more modest than that. We want to critically think through these big and important issues with you. And so we're giving you our perspective and what we think is true. And I'm also what they call a DPhil student out here. So DPhil is what Oxford calls the PhD. And it means doctorate in philosophy, which is what a PhD stands for as well. But so I'm studying something called philosophical theology. So basically, you're doing theology. Again, that's the study of God. And you take the tools of philosophy and, argumentation, precision, clarity, and you map that onto your theology. And so I'm looking at um, something that I don't think has ever been done before. So there's a whole body of literature called the meaning of life literature. And then there's this body of literature that's called horrendous evil. And so usually they don't have any scholarly conversation. But what I'm trying to do is I bring them together. And so my whole doctoral thesis is revolving around this question of what can God do for a life that's been savaged by this thing called horrendous evil. And horrendous evil is a very specific type of evil. It's an evil that is, at first glance, life ruinous. So on your deathbed reflection, you think to yourself, gosh, it probably would have been better if I had not been born, because I had this sort of experience. So I'm trying to see what God can do for life like that with respect to meaning. And that's made for some really challenging but really interesting research. And that's what I do here. And I'm married. And I have a wonderful church and a wonderful community and all of those things here as well.
Man, that's a heavy topic to carry.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's I view it as like a service to God
yeah.
and a service to people.
Yeah.
And I remember praying to the Lord that if He allowed me into the program, that I would do it to the glory of God.
Yeah.
And so I said that in a very determined way, and He's allowed me in. And so that's my goal in this philosophical theological work. So,
Well, and it makes me think like you must have the grace of God in order to be able to carry that weight, to carry that load, like a yoke with Christ, right? Of being able to
yeah.
do that, because like just me thinking about it, I'm like, oh my goodness, I would drown. I think I would drown.
Mm,
Weirdly enough, I am very much interested in how we can overcome evil in this world and everything, based on like parts of my story, but also I've just seen it within the world, and it's not something that's going to go away. There are people that are experiencing great evil now, and
yeah.
I do think like in a way it's a responsibility for me, because I've made it through to this other side of overcoming different types of trauma. I was sexually abused as a child. I
No.
struggled with my identity around adoption. And then I also went into like an addictive lifestyle of substances, alcohol mostly. And so I experienced a lot of chaos and evil, but I also created a lot of chaos and evil for myself. And I think a huge part of that was because I just didn't feel like I was worthy of a good and beautiful life. And then
Yeah.
now, like, I mean, I'm a completely different person than I was before when I had experienced all that stuff, like night and day person. And it all is the glory of God of where I am today, and that I can walk with peace and walk with His grace and His mercy. But my point is that now it's like, as somebody that's come through to the other side, is that just something that I hold for myself and love between me and Christ? Or is that something that I now need to figure out how to articulate it, how to share it for the glory of God, and so that hopefully others can also come through to the other side?
Yeah. I also think too, Melanie, that the problem of evil is probably the most significant objection to theism in general. So that's belief in God in general, but also to Christian theism specifically. And I make that distinction because Christian theism holds on to these divine attributes. So divine attributes are qualities that God has. So one example would be transcendence. So God's attribute, to be transcendent means that you're above and beyond the material world, the physical world. And because Christians hold on to and are unwilling to compromise on certain attributes like God being all powerful, all knowing, and all loving, that's why you have the problem of evil. If he wasn't any of those things, then you wouldn't really have an issue. But because they're stubborn on holding on to that, and that's going to be because, well, that's what the scriptures teach, and that's what historical Orthodox Christianity has always understood God to be, then you have an issue because it seems at first glance to be incompatible with something like suffering and evil in our world. So as I'm doing this for God, I feel also this weight of doing it for people that are very genuinely challenged by this problem. So, I was recently watching, so the president of OCCA is a chap named John Lennox, Professor John Lennox. He was a mathematician at Oxford University, and he was just on Alex O'Connor's show. He was once called the Cosmic Skeptic, and he's actually a friend, one of the nicest dudes you would ever come across. And Alex, if you're listening, I got nothing but love for you, bro. And this was central to his interview of John. John being a very well-respected Christian public intellectual, debating everyone from Christopher Hitchens, Peter Singer, Richard Dawkins, and the whole sort of new atheist movement, essentially. And this problem isn't going away. It is something that people care a lot about and want answers to. And it doesn't matter what worldview you come from. And by worldview, I mean these are the lenses in which we view the world, and no one's without one. So some people have a Christian lens, that'd be their worldview. Some people have an Islamic lens, that'd be their worldview. Some people are atheist, and that would be their worldview. And so it doesn't matter what worldview you come from, everyone is required to give a response. And so part of my service in my doctoral research is to help people that raise this perennially relevant question to encounter the response that comes uniquely out of Christianity. So it's not only intellectual, because there's been formidable responses out of the past 2,000 years, but moreover, it's a deeply existential response too. It speaks not only to the mind, but to the heart, right? As we see God incarnating, dwelling amongst us, suffering amongst us as he's Emmanuel, God with us, and ultimately going to the cross and then the resurrection. So sorry, I don't mean to take us off into left field too much, but that's what motivates me and why, I'm here.
I think that's wonderful. I'm okay going off into the left field. You did good.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear more about your personal story of how you came to know God and the events that led up to you choosing Christ.
Yeah. So you said you grew up in a Christian home?
Christian home, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in a Catholic home. And so we would go to Mass fairly regularly, but it was devoid of any in-depth comprehension. So you'd go to Mass, you're aware of figures like Christ. You're aware that he went to the cross. But there was just no real understanding and appreciation for what he actually did. And it was a superficial, I would say, spirituality. And then when I was 12 years old, my parents got a divorce, and it was a real nasty one, eh? And it shattered the family. And at 12, having gone through probably trauma at that age, I think what we all do as a response to trauma is try to find emotional equilibrium. So we want to find peace again, right? And so we want to make sense of the situation. We want to make sense of the world. We want to make sense of our place in the world. And so some people do this through academics. Some people do it through sports. Some people do it through, I don't know, whatever, pick, your poison. Unfortunately, I sort of fell into the wrong group of people. So they made me feel like I belonged. They made me feel like I was one of them. They made me feel like I was valuable, and to some degree sort of made sense of the situation. And I could find a bit of emotional equilibrium. However, these weren't the best individuals to sort of find that in. So they introduced me to the party lifestyle, drinking, smoking cigarettes on the weekend. And then, it's not long before you're smoking some weed for the first time. And then you're smoking it a bit more regularly. Okay, now you're a pothead. Now you do a wake and bake and you're getting blazed all day long and all that sort of stuff. And then you're really partying on the weekends. Now you're getting in fights. And it was a real dark season of my life. I was wandering in darkness during those years, junior high, high school. And by the time I finished high school, just barely, by the way, Melanie, I got kicked out of my mom's house. I moved in with my dad, got kicked out of my dad's house, and then moved into a really rough neighborhood in my hometown. And while I was there, that's when I got introduced to hard drugs. So, Oxycontins, Percocets, morphine. You told me you did, well, you were a bit of cocaine, a bit of ecstasy, and then
Yeah,
more drinking. Is that right?
I was mostly drinking, but then I did like party drugs. So I've done ecstasy, mushrooms, cocaine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I never trusted things like ecstasy because I always pictured some guy in an undershirt with a mustard stain
Oh,
making it, right? So I was like,
yeah.
okay, well, I'll sort of like hedge my bets and get something more pharmaceutical. At least some scientist made it. And so it's just the dumbest logic. And so I did that, and it wasn't long, as is natural with opiates, that I was addicted. So I'm snorting rails from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to bed. And at this time, I had also started working at a hip hop clothing store. So this group of dudes, they open up this hip hop clothing store. They bring me along because I really enjoy the business side of things and running the store for them. For them, the utility of the store was it was a front for selling crack cocaine. So these guys were crack dealers, so they could wash the money through the store. I really liked, running a business, and they were drug dealers, and that's helpful if you have a drug addiction to be, this sort of symbiotic relationship. And so that went on for some time, and things climaxed at a reggae club night. So you said you did party drugs. Do you go to the club? Were you that kind of folk?
Yeah, I went to the club. More so like parties locally. Like I grew up outside of the city, so sometimes we would go to the club, but the club was kind of boring. We did raves sometimes, like parties in the
Okay.
forest, like things like that.
See, that seemed very alien to me, the whole
Yeah.
rave scene. And that's probably a good thing because I would have just destroyed myself even quicker. But so I go to this club with a friend of mine. It's a reggae club. So my background's Caribbean. My dad's from Guyana. And we go to this reggae club, and I'm with somebody also Caribbean. And, special occasion, we had a bit of money in our pocket. So we're doing cocaine, we're doing opiates, smoking some weed, drinking, all of that sort of thing. And we go back to his place, and I just pass out on the couch, eh? And he has, unbeknownst to me, a drug induced schizophrenic episode. So he starts hearing these voices, and these voices say, "You need to chop Alonzo's head off." So while I'm sleeping, this guy grabs a blade and swings. And Melanie, for you and for the listeners, I just want to make this as clear as I possibly can. I think that God performed a miracle in my life that night. And when people ask me to share on my story, and I'm very happy to do so, I often say that it's not my story, it's Christ's story. And you'll understand in a moment So when this guy takes this blade and swings, by God's grace, he hits me in the back of the head right here on this bone, this little lump that some people have at the base of their skull. And that woke me up from my sleep, which I'm sure, it would wake most people up from their sleep. And then I was able to push him off me and get out of the house and get myself to a hospital. And after being, interrogated by the police and stuff, because it's a violent crime and they're going to try to, investigate, they sewed me up and they said, "Hey, you can't leave," because I was like, get my clothes on to go and dip because my drugs, they're not with me. I need to go and get them. And they said, "Man, if you leave, you could die." And it was like, okay, tell me more. And they said, "Well, he hit you so hard in the back of the head that you're bleeding internally in your brain." So I bled internally in my brain for 3 days. And they did MRI scans every few, hours or half a day or whatever it was. And that gave me time to soberly reflect, Melanie, for probably the first time in a very long time. I hadn't been sober for an extended period of time since I was just a little boy after that divorce, hey? So this gave me the space to reflect and think to myself, gosh, I'm probably not going on the best path in life. And after I got out of the hospital, a few weeks later, I noticed my sister starting to change. And I was like, "Why are you changing?" And she's like, "Well, I'm starting to go to church." And I'm like, "Why are you happy?" And, it's just weird. I was just a miserable human being. And she said, "Well, it's because I'm going to church. I found God. And I was like, okay. And she's like, "You should come." And I was like, "No, bun your church. I'm not going to go to church." And and she's like, "No, no, no. It's good vibes there." She was such a brilliant evangelist. It's good vibes, Alonzo. And so I don't know, she did that plus bribe me with food. And so I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll go." And so I went, and that's when, Melanie, I don't know if you had this experience or not, and I'd be curious to know. But when I went and I heard this pastor, who I'm still in contact with today, when I heard him unpack the scriptures, it was like I had been lied to my entire life about who Jesus is. I didn't really understand who he was and is. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, I think it was more of a gradual thing though. Because for me, like, I walked away from faith as a teenager. By 21, I hit rock bottom, surrendered my whole life, ended up going to a women's recovery house. And it was there that I really started to allow myself the space to get to know who Jesus was, who God was, what Christianity was all about. And I think up until that point, it had been, for me, it had been my parents' religion. And
Yeah,
so, and I didn't, a huge part of me was just so angry with my parents and with God and Christians as a whole that I didn't want to learn anything about it because I didn't want them to win, because I
yeah,
knew that my parents wanted me to be a good Christian girl and I didn't want to give
yeah,
them that satisfaction. And I also didn't want it to be their idea. And so I think for myself, when I ended up in that recovery house, we had Bible study there and we would go to church on Sundays. And it was there that I really started to like unravel everything that I had thought was accurate about Christianity
yeah,
and try to
yeah,
understand, like, okay, what is reality? What is true? What is scriptural? What is just like been kind of used to try and keep me into line and stuff like that. And it's been a
yeah.
very gradual process.
How long of a time frame was that?
So the program is 3 months, but I chose to stay for 7 months. I wanted to ensure that I wasn't
Good
going
for
to
you.
fall out and relapse because my goodness, what a mess that would
Yeah.
be.
Oh, the struggle is so real, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So I think mine was a bit quicker than what you're describing. So I go there and I'm just gobsmacked. Wow, this Jesus figure is so beautiful and wonderful. There, and I mean those like in the technical sense, like there's awe and wonder at this figure, this colossal figure named Jesus. And that that sort of initial phase was a few months. I'd go on a Sunday. I had this really sweet dude that would pick me up. Sometimes my sister would pick me up on a Sunday. I still stunk of weed because I would sort of wake and bake and then go. And I'd go to church, and I remember just crying at most services when they would be talking about Jesus and this unconditional acceptance and love and grace and strength and wisdom that were all, associated with him. And excuse me. And so I really became mesmerized by this figure, Jesus. And it was after a few months of that. And again, like I wasn't just weeping, I felt like God was speaking to me in a very, not in an audible voice sense, but it was like every time I went, it's like the pastor knew exactly what I needed to hear. And he just happened to be speaking on that. And I'm not a big fan of coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences. And so, but it was, it had that sort of vibe to it. And so anyway, it was a few months after that he gave a very simple gospel invitation, who wants to follow Jesus and know that their sins are forgiven, that that heaven would be their home if they died today, and know that they have peace with God. And I raised my hand 15 years ago. I was maybe 16 years ago now, actually. I was 21 years old. So we were like the same age, eh? And that transformed my life. Now, it wasn't immediate, as you can probably appreciate. So, I go back home that day and I'm like still smoking weed and cigarettes and stuff. And it was after a group prayed for me that the opiate addiction ceased. I don't know how to explain it, but it was miraculous. I went to bed with it and then I woke up without it. And praise God for that, because I know, we were talking off air before. I've had two friends die from fentanyl, and I know that, and I have family members that have a real strong opiates addiction, and even going to rehab, that addiction is especially difficult to break. And so it was just a miracle that God did in my life. But what took longer were things like alcohol, smoking weed, cigarettes. And I think that the Lord did that intentionally. One, I just needed immediate rescue. And then two, these other substances, I needed to learn how to trust him, to lean on him, and to live in community and lean on community. So I moved out of my really bad neighborhood and moved in with my sister and brother. My brother got saved at the same time and learned how to live for Jesus in that small community. And there was a really sweet time. It was a hard time. I was learning how to handle my emotions, for example. I hadn't handled my emotions soberly for nearly half my life at that point. So you have to like learn these things, as I'm sure you had to learn. You can't just sort of get upset and then go and get drunk. You need to like sort of deal with it. And so that was a really tough moment, but it was the community as well as God's intervention that ultimately see me through that. So, and it was after that period of time that I got saved and started this discipleship journey that I was exposed to this thing called apologetics. And this blew my mind. I didn't know that this whole intellectual world existed within Christianity. So I had quit my job at the hip hop clothing store and I was washing cars at this place called Car Star. I don't know if you've ever heard of Car Star before. It's a collision repair shop. And I was like detailing cars and emptying garbages. And I promise you, Melanie, I could not have been happier washing cars and emptying garbages. I would have been happy if the Lord called me to do that for the rest of my life because I had him. The sky was blue, or coffee tastes better. The birds were chirping. I was so happy that I knew the Lord and that I had his love just pour out over me. So it was in that season of my walk with him that I discovered this thing called apologetics. Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ, and William Lane Craig, Reasonable Faith and stuff. And that curiosity was just insatiable in me. And for years, I was just listening to podcasts and reading my books and reading the Bible. And then eventually this door opened up to apply at this thing called OCCA. And I applied at OCCA, and I applied also for a certificate in theology here at the university. And that was my door into the world that I'm in today.
That's incredible. Two things that came up as I was listening to you share. Number one, how important it is to have people that are willing to come alongside the vulnerable when we're in that transition period of laying ourselves down, laying our lives down, and trying to seek out the heart of Christ in the midst of all of the confusion that is going on. I have a friend named Jim Ramos. He's got a ministry in the States called Men in the Arena. And one of the
Mm,
things that he says is that Christianity wrecks your life. Not in the
mm.
sense of like negativity, like, oh, my life sucks now, but in the sense of you don't have to change one, like you don't, there's only one thing you have to change, and that's everything. Like Christ
Ah,
completely transforms every single part of our lives. And what I what grieves my heart, I guess I would say, is the fact that so many people want to say yes to Jesus, but they're not willing to lay their lives down for him. And they're not
yeah,
willing to like accept the fact that the transition period is not just the flick of a switch. It is a process of sanctification that can at times be completely grueling because you are
mm,
learning how to live in a completely different way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think grueling's a great word. It's sort of this glorious
Yeah.
gruelingness
Yeah.
because on one hand, you're so fulfilled. You have purpose in life.
Yeah.
You're discovering your identity, your true identity.
Oh, yeah.
You
Preach.
you you're you're
Ah,
you're you're full of joy and peace. You know, there were there were so many storms during that time, but you felt like Christ in the boat in the midst of the storm that was
yeah.
able to take a nap. And so that's it's this balance of this gloriousness of knowing God, but then also the gruel. So yes, storms rage. In fact, sometimes things get worse when you decide to take a stand, enter into a relationship with Christ and take a stand. There was lots of consequences to that relationship with him. Really difficult decisions like closing doors on friends who you knew for many, many years, but you knew you couldn't continue your sobriety in a relationship with them, for example. And so there were many nights of tears over that, just saying, God, this has got to be worth it. And what I've discovered over the 16 years that I've walked with him is that it is worth it. It is worth that grueling bit. And I would argue, too, that um, the joy and the peace haven't left me. The fulfillment, the purpose, the identity, those are just going deeper and deeper into my heart. But the gruel likewise continues. You're always dying to self.
Mm-hmm.
You're always taking up your cross and following him. C.S. Lewis used to say in one of his books, people that never try to be good don't know how hard being good actually is. Like the easy thing is to just give in to the addiction, right? It's saying no to the addiction that's actually quite intense and can be grueling. And so I think as we continue like the discipleship sanctification process, um, even 16 years into it, there's this gruelingness to it as he continues to prune you and go deeper into your heart and deeper into the issues that are actually holding you bondage, idols and addictions and so on. So I hope that wasn't too much of a waffle, but really what I'm trying to emphasize is that there is this gloriousness and gruelingness in the walk, but it's worth it. And it's
Yeah.
worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I even think like if you have a wound that's infected and painful and oozing, and then like you have to rub it, you have to clean it out, you have to get all the grit, the grime, the nastiness out of it. And then you have to like wash it clean and put an ointment and a bandage on it. And like I feel like that's kind of like the process that I've had to go through, like more specifically in the very beginning when when I had to like surrender everything, cuz the same for me, like I had to walk away from every relationship that I had, every friendship that I had, and completely lay my life down and remove myself from what I had known to be my regular everyday routine. And then
Yeah.
like even as you say, like now, like there are moments in my walk with God where I am in deep mourning, deep loss, deep grief, whether it be friendships, whether it be like my biological father died when I was a child. I don't know why I said his name, but specifically my biological brother died of an overdose, and I had met him when I
Oh,
was
I'm so sorry.
18. Yeah, thank you. I met him and my biological sister and my mom when I was 18. Stayed connected with them, not like overly connected. I don't know what like 18-year-olds don't want to hang out with their everyday family, let alone grabbing another family and hanging out with them. Like, like I wanted to hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
And then so anyways, like I had stayed somewhat connected with them over the years, and then about I think it was about 4 years ago now, like I got the call that he had died, and the amount of grief that I experienced in that moment. And I even had some people say to me like, "Oh, well, you didn't know him that well. Like, why are you so upset?" And I think for me, like the deepest wound was that I didn't know him very well, that he
Yeah.
was my brother, and now I've lost that opportunity. Not only that, I've lost count of the number of people that I've lived life with that have died of this disease of alcoholism or drug addiction, and like
Yeah.
this lifestyle choice. Like I was an addiction support worker for a number of years, and I also was an at-risk youth worker. So like I've seen the devastation that can come with alcoholism and addiction. Like I've seen the devastation that can come with that. And I mean
Yeah.
the grueling work of like, yeah, like it is like like a glorious gruel that we have to go
Yeah.
through in order to lay our lives down and surrender everything that we are to Christ. And I find so often these days people want to just leave little parts of their life, but they want to keep the parts they want to keep. God
Yeah.
asks for everything from us, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it might take time. It might take like trial and error of learning how to let go of certain things. But I think at the end of the day, are we willing to allow Christ to take over our entire lives? Are we willing to lay ourselves down and to ask for his will to be done in our life?
I think so. I have a friend. His name is Rahil Patel. He's an author and he's a speaker at OCCA as well. And he wrote a book called Redeemed by Love. He was a Hindu monk for 20 years. Really big deal within the Hindu world here in England. And we were having a conversation once, and it was on discipleship. And I remember him telling me, the deeper you go into God, the less you can take with you.
Mm.
And I think that that's true, man. We want to take these things into our lives with us into the relationship with God. But God loves us so much that he's not willing to allow those sorts of things to continue to persist in our lives. The idols that we have, these negative narratives that we hold, the insecurities that we cherish and that are secretly fueling the things that we do. It all gets sort of shed the deeper we go into God, and he helps us to shed those sorts of things, but it's painful as we do that. As John 15, again, it's pruning so that we can bear more fruit.
Yeah, and I even think like you mentioned identity and like identity in Christ. And for me, I'm getting to know the real Melanie a little bit more every single day, in the sense of the more that I pursue Christ, the more that I read scripture, the more that I surrender my heart and my life and everything that I am over to God, there's a deeper sense of intimacy, a deeper sense of understanding and recognizing how he has created me, fearfully and wonderfully made, knit together in my mother's womb. Like the things that I love, the things that I long for, the things that I desire, they are aligned with who he is and what his scripture says. And
Yeah.
like getting to know yourself, like so many people struggle with this whole identity concept today. And all of the things that I would have thought were my identity are no longer a part of my life, no longer a part of my story. It's like I call it getting back to Eden. Like
Yeah.
God had an intention at the very start, a very intimate intention of being in relationship with Adam and Eve, and he still has that intention for all of us. And to get back to that and to get to that level of vulnerability and recognizing that he has created us. He knows our inner workings, our innermost being. He knows everything that he intended for us to become. And allowing him to go through the process of pruning back the parts that no longer are part of who we truly are. I think that in itself is like a beautiful concept to really wrap my head
Yeah.
around. But also the whole love aspect. I didn't realize how little I knew about love until I surrendered my life to Christ. Because now I do know what unconditional love feels like. It's this love, this overwhelming sense of love that, I've never experienced from another person, another situation, even my pet. Like, there's literally no amount of love that has gone and put themselves on the cross to die for my sake, that I might be able to step into God's throne room and say, Father, I'm here. And,
Yeah.
being able to rest in the arms of the God that created every single star, every single galaxy, every single plant and animal, and every single human in his image, to be able to rest in that sweet embrace and just be present and not have to bring anything other than myself, anything other than my heart, my love, my desire for this creator that has chosen to create me. That's something that is very, very real and raw for me. And I think a huge part of that really came to recognition when I really thought about my birth story, because
Mm.
my biological mom was told by the men in her life to get an abortion. And
Oh no.
praise God, like my life has been a target of the enemy since my conception. And God
Yeah.
has obviously just given me this ability to come through to the other side, to overcome the trauma that came with recognizing that I was given up for adoption, to overcome every other piece of trauma that came along that journey for me through my childhood. And I used to think that, I blame my parents, I blame the world, I blame everybody, I blame God. But now it's not about blaming anybody. Evil happens in this world, in this life. And I am the last person to try and compare my story to other people's story, because we've all walked a different path and we all have different feelings of fear and shame and trauma that we've experienced. But we all have the invitation to take all of that wreckage and lie it at the feet of the cross, the foot of the cross,
Yeah.
and to surrender it over to Christ. And he does not celebrate the fact that we've been through these things, but he does take all of that wreckage. He weeps with us, he mourns with us, and then he offers us his everlasting healing. And I think
Yeah.
that's what our world is missing. So many
Yeah.
people are looking for healing in all the wrong places, and they're only causing more harm to themselves. And I
Yeah.
guess like that's part of my heart and my passion for doing whatever it is that I'm doing here with Rekindled Faith, and just being a public person online now. It's just I want people to know that there is hope and healing, and it is available in Christ.
Yeah. I think just to build on what you're saying so beautifully, Melanie, with respect to this unconditional love and experiencing that, and that this is what our world is deeply longing for at bottom, is I had a recent experience, and I had some sort of wickedness in my heart that I didn't know was there. I think it was some situation which prompted it to sort of come out from the depths and sort of show its face. You know what I mean by that?
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, and I don't even remember what it was. It was something absolutely petty. Something that was, I probably had this idol. Maybe it was approval or people liking me, something like that. Alonzo's a real piece of work. Melanie. Let me just be honest with you. And so I have this idol, and whenever something threatens it, what we do is we respond with, force and rage, and we respond disproportionately to what actually is going on. And so this sort of thing happened to me, and I was like, oh my gosh! Like once I sort of stepped back and sort of regained my rationality, oh my gosh, yeah, this is a wicked, wicked part of my heart. But here's the thing that I realized, Melanie, is that the Lord, this was no new revelation to the Lord that this was in my heart. He knew this already. It was a revelation to Alonzo that it was in my heart. But the Lord for years and years and years treated me as if it wasn't there. He loved me as if that wasn't there and didn't bring it up before I was ready to have it brought up. And then once it was brought up, he was able to address it like a skilled master surgeon, waiting for the right time and making the right incisions such that it gets rid of the disease but preserves the life of the patient. And that's what he did. And I don't know if that strikes you, but that strikes me as something that I can't even fathom, that sort of grace and mercy and love, that unconditional love, like you were saying, that he shows to us. And I'm sure there are more things there. And you know what? He still blesses me. I'm able to go on a podcast like this one, which I don't deserve to be on. And I get to have my wife that I don't deserve to have, and this job and all of these sorts of things, even though, I have these things going on in my own heart. And I think that in those moments, like what you're describing, like what I'm describing, our chances for the gospel to sink down deeper into our hearts. So one of my favorite pastors is the late pastor, Tim Keller. And I try to listen to a couple of his sermons every week. It's just part of my devotion. And he has this line that transformed my life. And it was, the more the gospel sinks into your heart, the more unsinkable you become. That was a paradigm shift for me, where I'm like, okay, my identity, I'm like grounding it in this idol, this thing. And I'm a very sinkable person because of that. I'm very vulnerable. But when those sorts of moments happen, I have this discipleship sanctification moment where I can try to, by God's grace and spirit, shift it over to, okay, now instead of me thinking I'm valuable because I'm a public speaker and I'm just valuable because my name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life, well, now I'm not as vulnerable. Now I'm unsinkable because my identity is grounded in something like the gospel. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That resonates deep.
Yeah.
And like that's the onion concept that I have. Like the Lord peels back layers little by little. We don't have to change everything in one night. For some of us, maybe we change a lot in one night. But I
Mm,
think that it's like an invitation to continue that refining process, that we get to
yeah.
like walk hand in hand with God, and slowly he's going to bring things to the surface and stuff like that. And I don't think it's something that we'll ever graduate from. I think that it's a lifelong journey of just allowing the gospel to sink deeper and deeper into our spirit, and allowing ourselves to be humbled by the Lord and to take ownership for when we are wrong. Because I don't know about you, but I wasn't really taught how to do that. Like I was
Mm,
told, oh, you should say sorry and forget and forgive because God forgave you. But I was never shown or told how to do these things. And so I struggled a lot with that, because then I just had a bunch of garbage that I was pulling around with me everywhere I went, and I
mm,
didn't know how to change that. And then, but now it's like, yeah, you know what? I still do have some resentments from my childhood that I need to work on, and I know I need to work on them, and I need to be able to lay them down and ask for God to help me find forgiveness in my heart so that I can be free, and so that I can even become a more deeply rooted follower of Christ. Because when we hold on to those things in our life that those resentments, those that hatred, that bitterness, all of those things, we take away the opportunity for us to get the good spiritual fruit. We take away the
Mm.
opportunity for us to have a real, authentic, and intimate relationship with Christ. So, and then I just think, like, what do I want more? Do I want to live a life being suffocated by the things that I hate so badly? Or do I want to live a life that I can walk through the wreckage and I can walk through my past and I can walk with the hand of the God that loves me unconditionally, and I can see past the pain and see the people behind the pain that I've
Yeah.
experienced. And I don't have it all figured out yet. I still, like I said, like I still have resentments that I need to let go of. And I think in this season that I'm at
Same.
right now, that's what I feel like God is really encouraging me to pursue, is to be able
Yeah.
to lie those things down and really surrender that to him.
Yeah. I think for the listeners that have journeyed all the way, God bless them, through our hour-long conversation, I think I want to encourage them that, one, what you're describing sounds extremely brave and courageous and seems deeply right in the biblical sanctification sense. But what I want to encourage the listeners that have been journeying with us is that though we're talking about deep things and hard things, it is so worth it knowing Christ. There's freedom. Whom the Son sets free is free indeed, John 8. And there's freedom from these things that so easily ensnare our lives and warp our identity and the narratives that are in our head. So if you're listening and you're somebody that perhaps has walked away from the church or perhaps deconstructed, and maybe you're totally justified in that. Maybe you've had some really horrible experiences in the church or with Christians. And if that's you, I'm just so sorry that you've had those experiences. But I think what we're trying to advocate here for is that there is a real God, and he is love. And he demonstrated that love on the cross by enduring unfathomable pain. But more than that, he rose again from the dead 3 days later. And that gospel is not only intellectually robust, there is an intellectual case to be made for it that is, I think, outclasses radically every other worldview. But also there is hope in that gospel. Hope that you too can experience the love of Christ in this transformative, deep, life-terraforming way that we're describing. There's freedom there, and there's hope there. Hope for a brighter future, that ultimately things will end in new creation. Things are healed, justice is exercised. But also the hope for purpose in life, an identity that actually reflects truth and reality, and all of the other beautiful things that come along with Jesus. So I just want to encourage you, maybe give Christianity one more shot and approach the scriptures and try to find some community and give it another shot, because he's worth it. All that he's done for you and all that he's wanting to do in your life, it's worth it to give him one more chance.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Alanzo, for coming on today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so
I
thankful for the
enjoyed it too.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed it immensely, and you'll have to have me back.
Oh, please. Yes.
And we'll get to the youth stuff then.
Yeah,
How about
let's
that?
talk about the youth stuff. We'll get that one going. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again. And I thank you for the work that you're doing, and the fact that you're willing to be vulnerable and share all of the good things that God has done in your life through your obedience and through you choosing to lay down your life and follow him.
Yeah, and is it okay if I say, Melanie, that if people are interested in some of the intellectual side of Christianity, in addition to Rekindled podcast, they can check out our website. So it's just the OCCA, so the OCCA.org. And if you're interested in some youth stuff from OCCA, you can just go to rebootquestions.com. And both of these places, specifically OCCA, you're going to find a ton of free content that's going to be super helpful as you're thinking about really big topics like Old Testament violence and the problem of evil and why trust the Bible and what about God and science and all of these sorts of really important questions. So I hope that's a blessing to you if you find yourself there.
Absolutely. And I'll have all that stuff in the show notes as well. So for those listeners, you can just go there and click and be on your way.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, listeners, thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Rekindled Faith. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow the show. Share it with your friends. Let's get the word out there and have these conversations brought into the hands of other people that may need a little bit of a spiritual uplift in their faith journey. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the show notes. Bye for now.